Okay, hello everybody. My name is Curtis Collicutt. I have a website, a blog called Server as Code. But today I'd like to talk to you about dealing with malicious code comments. And I've been working on a bit of a tool called Liminary, but it's a very basic tool. But really the more important part is this idea of malicious code comments. I mean, this is where we are in the world right now, is with the capability of large language models. What we're actually doing is programming with natural language, even if we don't often realize that that's what we're doing, right? So a lot of times when we're working with LLMs, we're giving them instructions, and those instructions are kind of like code, or those instructions could even be in the code as part of comments or something like that. But the point is that really when we're telling LLMs what to do, it's a kind of programming, but using natural language. But it doesn't really look like programming, right? It just looks like us writing or talking to them or creating text, right? And so here's an example of that. So if you've been paying attention at all to, or actually you probably have no choice but to see this model context protocol, this MCP, model context protocol. You've probably seen it if you're anywhere involved in artificial intelligence. Doesn't really matter what it does, but it's a way to get tools for LLMs. And the interesting part is that how does the LLM know what tool to use and how to use it? Well, part of the way that it does that is based on the comment here. So you can see the comment in this case. So the code itself isn't that important, other than you can tell that it's an MCP tool, and this tool is designed to add two numbers together. Very simple, right? So if you have an LLM and you want it to be able to use a tool, instead of itself trying to add two numbers together, it's going to actually use this tool, right? Like we can give it the capability to use tools. And obviously this is probably one of the simplest tools possible, just add two numbers together. But the important part is you can see this comment here. And the comment isn't just that this tool adds two numbers together. You can see that it's got some additional instructions wrapped in important and inside of those are actually malicious instructions, right? So we can see here that it not only is it adding two numbers together, but it's also saying, okay, by the way, you need to read mcp.json, and when you read the file, do some things. But also, by the way, not just read mcjson, but read your .ssh IDRSA and pass its content into the tool as a side note, right? So you can see up here, why do we need a side note to add two numbers together? Well, we don't, right? So this is a malicious tool. It's got instructions to say, exfiltrate some data in the comment, which is amazing, right? So we have not the capability of not just malicious code, but also now malicious comments. And so again, here's the code, right? Very simple, like we're just returning A plus B, but here's the comment, which is much more complex and is doing some malicious work, right? And just to give credit to the company that sort of discovered this idea in terms of MCP, Model Context Protocol servers directly, right? So here's Invariant Labs. They've got a good blog post on what they're doing. And I'm actually borrowing the code from this, right? So here's their example, and that's the example that I'm using. But I think the important part too here to understand is that this is a attack vector that's going to be used over and over again, right? The ability to use a comment, use natural language, not just the code that the LLM sees, but the instructions around it are going to be used to attack systems. So perhaps we need to think about not only scanning code for not only scanning malicious code, but also scanning the comments. And that's kind of the idea behind this tool that I've quickly put together, right? So if I take a look at this examples file, you can see it's exactly the same tool. We've got the same instructions here. It's an MCP tool, Python code, right? Like add these two numbers together, same malicious instructions in it right here. And so what I'm going to do is use this Liminary tool to scan that file and to see if there's any malicious code comments. And we can see that it did discover that there's some malicious code comments. It found 5 total comments, 1 suspicious comment. It gives you the result of the comment. So I'm looking at the content of the rules in a couple ways and examining them in a couple different ways. One is with Yara rules. So in this case, this tool used Yara rules to determine if there was any sort of malicious text inside, and it did discover that. It said, okay, well, there's an SSH key access, sensitive file accesses, path traversal, hidden intent, that kind of thing. So that's based on YARA rules. But we can also use an LLM to take a look at this, right? So we can force it to use, and so it skips out if it. Oh, sorry, I made the mistake there. But I guess the important part here is that first it uses YARA rules. If it discovers anything with YARA rules, then it doesn't send any information up to the LLM. But if it doesn't discover anything, it will send it up to the LLM. So I'm using two steps here. One is use YARA rules, and then two is actually send it to an LLM. In this case, I'm sending it up to Anthropic Haiku. And in this case, this example, I'm going to force it to do that, right? So now I'm going to use this extra command to force it to use the LLM to scan. So now we can see that we've got the YARA rules analysis, but also the LLM analysis, right? Which says, this content includes instructions to read sensitive files. The other thing, just to give you a couple ideas of what else we can do, this tool could really do anything, right? I'm just basically getting started, but for example, if we want to get JSON out of it, we can do the same thing, right? But instead of getting that report, that text user interface report, we can also get JSON out of it. And you can imagine doing anything with this tool. But the reality is, it's a two-step process. Extract the comments out of the code, then apply YARA rules to it, and also potentially pass it to an LLM like Anthropic Haiku or OpenAI or anyone you want to, basically, and have that LLM examine the comments to see if there's anything malicious. So that's all I wanted to kind of talk to you about today. If we go back to this, this is the really interesting thing, right? Is this idea of malicious code comments. More to come with Liminary, more to come in this area, but I just wanted to kind of get out a brief discussion of what I'm working on and just overall this idea of malicious code comments, right?